Cutoffs and Coffee, episode 19. Welcome back. CT, Coach James here. This episode, we have Tim Riley at Tim Riley Training on Instagram. This dude does a little bit of everything. He works with pros. He works with younger athletes. He works with group fitness athletes. This guy takes us from his story in the very beginning where he thought he had it all figured out. He was going to read the book. He was going to take the classes. He was going to go work in a Globo gym, and everything was going to, every goal that he ever wanted in training was going to be accomplished through that. He quickly realized that this was not the best way to do it. He started reaching out. He started learning from other people. And he really took a long time to get to the place that he's at now, but now he's thriving. He's working with pros. He shares so much info with us. This is something that everybody needs to hear. He also recently released a knee pain program, which is unbelievable information for anybody, the athlete or the human being who is suffering from any type of knee issue. Whether it be long-term, whether it be short-term, whether it be acute, whether it be, after just jumping. There's so much information on knee pain here. And I think everybody's going to get a ton from this conversation.
Absolutely. This is a great episode. And as always, your sponsor for this podcast is Underdog Fitness. And when your underdogs are barking, the best thing to do is take one of these bad boys. This is the peanut roller in the Underdog kit. You can buy it separately. You can get it with the roller kit. But one of my favorite activities at night after a long day on my feet, long day of training athletes, beating them up, my feet get beat up too. So I roll on this bad boy about 5 minutes aside. And I'll tell you what, I can tell the difference the next day. I got that spring in my step and I'm ready to do some lunges.
If you like what we're doing on the podcast, give us 5 stars, reach out to us, let us know who you want to hear, who you want us to talk to. But without further ado, we really hope you appreciate this. We know you will. CT and James, Cutoffs and Coffee, episode 19 with Coach Tim Riley. Here we go. Coach Tim Riley at Tim Riley Training here at Cutoffs and Coffee. If you search for Tim on Instagram and you come across a big jack dude in black and white, you have found the right Tim Riley. Coach, thanks for coming on Cutoffs and Coffee, man.
Dude, thank you for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. So I like to start with this question because I think this is fun for people to know. I think this is fun for us to know as well as coaches. Instagram gives us an awesome opportunity to be able to show our skill set, to be able to show the athletes who we're working with, to be able to show who we are as individuals. What's something that you think we as co-hosts and the listeners, people listening to this, need to know about you that they can't find from an easy Instagram search?
So I try and do a good job of illustrating who I am, what's important to me, and the way I like to train athletes page, right? Yeah. So that's a good way to get people to relate. I think something that I haven't done the best job of is actually giving people a frame of reference of where I started, how I got started in fitness, and the route that I've taken to get to where I'm at today. So, the goal for me was to get to where I'm at, right? To be able to train pro athletes and do it at a high level and get results, right? And what I thought that was going to look like in order for me to get to that place was go to school for 4 years, get a PhD, intern, do the thing. You follow the steps, you get the result. And, most of my life looks like that. I mean, it looks like that in training. I know what to do. I know that if I do these things, most of the time I get the outcome that I'm looking for. And just the way that my life turned out, it didn't end up that way. And, I started in sales at an LA Fitness in Delray Beach.
Let's go LA Fitness.
Which, by the way, was totally miserable. I mean, just after a month, that was good, but after 2 months of doing that, I was like, oh, I'm a used car, and these people are not getting results, So transitioning out of that, I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to be useful. I knew I wanted to be effective. And I started working as a counselor, mentor at a drug and rehab facility. Didn't work out either. So now I'm at this crossroads. And I'm like, okay, I know I love training. I know I'm home in this space. Out of certification, I started working. And something that I think separated me early on was a genuine willingness I went to the best at the time, meant the most successful trainer at the gym. And I said, man, can I just shadow you? You don't have to, I'll pick up your weights. And that's what I did, man. That's where I started. And smarter than me, who are getting better results than me, that I was able to relate to. And, you know, fast forward 5 years, and now I'm in the position that I thought I would only be able to achieve by taking that traditional route. So for anybody out there who hasn't taken that traditional route,
Yeah,
I think ultimately a lot of it, what it comes down to is, are you willing to put in the work? You know, how much does it matter to you? And then what does that look like? Like, what are you willing to do? Like, I had to eat, you know, pardon my French, but I had to eat shit for a long time, you know? But the hard work paid off. I put myself in a position to be here where I am today. And then you got to capitalize on it.
That's great advice. That is great advice up front. We're going to ask you your story and how you got here. And I think you did a great job just answering that question of people want to ask you, go pick up weights for somebody who you respect, for somebody you appreciate. You follow Coach James around for hours and hours and hours. What was it, before James gets into his next question to segue? What was it about yourself? Was it how you were raised? Was it growing up? Was it the education system? What was it that made you realize, like, oh, this is the path. This is the way that this is what I need to do to be able to get to the place I want to be?
Sure. So it was definitely not my upbringing. It was definitely not the way I raised or lived most of my life. Actually, you know, the way I spent most of my life was almost an equal opposite to something I would consider as being humility, right? To being willing to put yourself in a position to say, hey, like, you know more than me, and I'm willing to do what it takes to learn. So at that same time, before I started training, I was struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, and that was the crux. I hit a bottom, and I knew that if I didn't change everything in my life, that nothing would change. And I got sober, and a part of that getting sober process is having the humility to reach out to another person and say, hey, man, like, I don't know how to do life on my own, but I know that you do. Can you show me how? And I was able to make tremendous strides in a short amount of time in my personal, mental, and emotional life by leaning on other people who had done it for long periods of time than me. And so, you know, when I saw that formula worked, that humility and being willing to learn from others and to sacrifice time to be able to get to where you need to go, that it worked in my personal life, I knew that could be an answer in my professional life. And if it could work for something as relentless as mental health and addiction, then it can certainly serve me well in other areas of my life, and it has.
Man, that's so powerful. Thanks for sharing that. You didn't have to. I really appreciate you bringing that up. James, go ahead.
Yeah. So I actually started at LA Fitness too as a trainer. That's just crazy. And I was able to learn a lot, you know, during my time there. But when I got into a performance gym, and I think the things that I learned, like sales was great. Like learning that helped me a lot. And I was able to learn from some of the other coaches or trainers there. But then I go into a performance facility, and like 1 hour in after I got hired and I started doing my training, like we start going through our dynamic warm up. And then I'm like, wait, I went to school for 4 years to do this. And I worked in a gym for 4 months. I was very successful there. I didn't leave because of lack of clients. I left because I took a teaching job and I just wanted to do performance training part-time. And then my head was spinning because the performance training director at the time, like pretty much just changed my whole mindset on what performance training actually was. Did you ever have a moment in your career that was similar to that just kind of was eye-opening and shifted how you started working with athletes?
Absolutely. So, you know, I'm going to cite a very specific event, but there have been so many people that I've learned on and leaned on throughout the years. And Grant Fowler and I worked together in the same gym for a long time. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but that guy is, he's an incredible thinker and problem solver, and being to work along with him and alongside him really challenged a lot of the traditional things that I understood. But for me personally, I would say the thing that happened is, okay, so I get my training certification. I'm learning from all these people. I'm trying to get into this performance space. I'm starting to train high school and middle school athletes, and I'm training myself, like what I believe training like an athlete looks like, which is, you know, you lift heavy, you do plyos, you do your dynamic warm up. But at that time, the general consensus was that, you know, if you have strong hamstrings, if you can squat heavy, and if you do enough plyos, like your athletic bases are generally covered. You may dip your toe into some quote unquote sports specific stuff, but you're definitely not going to do a leg press. And you're definitely not going to do a leg extension, because
Right.
those aren't functional. And they're going to make you slow, and you're going to be less athletic because of it. You know, so and the funny thing that happened is, like, I'm doing all these things right. And I'm hardly dipping into bodybuilding rep ranges. I'm getting stronger in the gym, but my performance is going down. And what's really happening is my health, my physical health, like just pain and discomfort, started to skyrocket. And I'm like, dude, what is wrong? Like, I'm checking all the boxes, the air quote boxes. And I've got crippling jumpers knee pain in both knees, you know, low back pain for days. And I'm foam rolling, I'm stretching, I'm reaching out, I've gone to the doctor, I've gone to the chiropractor, I've gone to multiple, you know. And I'm like, why can't I get better? I'm doing, and then, you know, introduction. I remember Just Fly podcast was just like getting started at this time. And at the time, the host of that show, Joel Smith, he was on this huge isometrics wave. Like, that was when, like, the isometrics were like, they fix everything. If you do isometrics, all you got to do is long duration isometrics. Everything's going to be great. Your athletes are going to be faster, going to jump higher. No one will ever get hurt. And so I'm like haphazardly sort of trying to lace these things in, you know, just sort of shooting up a prayer, hoping things work out, right? And so I really had to take a hard look at what I've been taught as being what is going to improve performance, what's going to keep me from injury, what I'm actually doing in my training, and what's missing. Because I got to the point, dude, I can dunk a basket. I can stand under the goal and dunk a basketball very easily. And I couldn't even play a pickup game of basketball. I was in so much pain. And so, you know, the gaps that I was missing was isolation movements in bodybuilding rep ranges. Getting back into that stuff, I noticed started to help immediately. I reached out to David Gray because I saw him doing these specific isometric movements, talking about co-contractions, and I slid in the guy's DMs, you know? And again, that's that same thread of like, dude, I'm willing to learn, you know, show me something with some value. I'm going to put myself in a position. And I paid that man. I worked with him for week after week after week on Skype while he was in Ireland for months, just learning what he had to talk about. And learning the exercises. So ultimately, if I could, you know, put all that in a nutshell, it would be my own failure in my own programming, right? That kind of led to this dumpster fire. And it made me question everything I was doing. And then I'm thinking, well, I can't have my athletes training the way I train, right? Which was another paradigm shift, because not everyone needs to be trained the same way, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. But what's funny is what you were saying, and a big thing I took from that is you need to spend some time training to understand if something works or if something doesn't work. Right. And a lot of times we're in a position now, and I talk about, basically the influence of Instagram and social media. It's like, all right, I'm going to get this program. Maybe, I'm going to do it for a week and then I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try something else. It sounded like you were just hammering these exercises over and over again. And then that's what happened. That's when you realized, that's when you had this change of mindset, like, oh, okay, I need to do something else. I need to reach out to other people. Again, your whole story about growth and getting information from people who are doing things better than you. Something that I really appreciate that you've done, what Jake Tura has done, who was on the podcast a couple of months ago, is we are big, strong athletes, like you said, who can dunk, who can jump out of the gym, who can lift a ton of weight. But what you don't see on your social media all the time is heavy sets and reps of just squats, of just bench, of just overhead press. You focused a lot on knee pain, even to the point of coming out with a knee pain program, which I think is so awesome. 10 years ago, I was the athlete who was just training super hard, professional football player. And I would have these issues and I would just always think, oh, I'll get through them. These are not things that people like us talk about. Right. So you developed a knee pain program based around things that you've learned and things that helped you. What did you think at the time? And it could have been just that. What did you think at the time was the need for your program? Why the knees? I know you said you had debilitating jumper's knee and it was terrible. Talk us through the process of coming up with the program, trying the different exercises, and now finally getting the opportunity to implement the program with some of your athletes.
Yeah, man. So, it was born out of necessity, right? Like, here's this thing I love that I cherish to do. That's really my outlet, and I can't do it. And I was not willing to accept that. And I knew that there had to be an answer. I refused to believe that just toughing it out and doing more reverse hypers and stretching and foam rolling and just doing long duration isometrics. I was like, this is not really working. The pain's never really going away. And I had these periods of time where like things would kind of get better, but then they'd get worse. And so I'm just riding this wave, this roller coaster where my hope gets renewed and then it gets dashed away the very next time. Like I play a whole game of pickup. I go to do one dunk attempt, and for whatever reason, that's the one, and it's just boom, and it's searing pain, and it's going to be that way for 2 weeks. So what the knee program ended up being is just the stuff that seemed to work. Everything else, see you later, sayonara. And for me, that's stretching was not the answer. Foam rolling was not the answer. The things that ended up being left over was having strong quads. Like first things first, if my quad and my patella tendon, they're linked, right? Like one becomes the other one, no matter which way you look at it, from which direction. So changing my squat form, I was a very hip dominant athlete. And I did a Coach Me Up episode on my YouTube page with Jump Science, Daniel Bach. And one of his main, if not the main way that he profiles his athletes and their needs is the differentiation between, are they a hip dominant athlete? Are they a knee dominant athlete? And a lot of times he's seen throughout his entire professional career that athletes that are too hip dominant and have weaker knee extensors end up with this patellar knee pain, this jumper's knee. So taking the principle of getting the quad strong and what that looks like in the weight room and how does it show up in movement. And then the next step was going to be from a biomechanics standpoint. And this is where my experience with David Gray was just beyond invaluable, because I had started doing the strengthening part, and that was helping a lot, but the problem hadn't been completely solved. And so my working with David was like sort of the marriage of those two concepts and being able to situate it in a way that's progressive, standardized over a period of time, where I began to find this formula of things that just flat out worked for me. And I've trained plenty of clients with jumper's knee that it also works for them too, right? And the elements are really simple and it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if I have a strong quad and I'm training my quads. I'm probably training my patellar tendon. You know, I am. And a quad that, and a patellar tendon that can tolerate intensive amounts of load, especially in big athletes like ourselves, is probably going to perform better. It's probably going to be able to tolerate those intense stop and starts. But then what I found is that I can have a strong quad, but if my calf and my hamstring aren't showing up to the party to stabilize the knee in those stops and starts and those quick changes of directions, then it doesn't matter either, right? Because if all of the force is going through the patellar tendon and nothing else is showing up to the party, I'm probably never going to be able to kick the pain entirely. And that's the knee pain program in a nutshell, man. It's just, how do I progressively overload my quads, truly guarantee that I'm just going to be training my quads in a way that's going to strengthen them? And then how do I progressively overload this co-contraction, this muscular coordination piece over a period of time to ensure that that's getting stronger as well? And it's worked well.
It's such an interesting way to approach it. I was always the type of guy, and I know James and I have talked about this a little bit, you know, knee hurts, throw the knee sleeve on, still squat heavy. You know, back hurts, all good, be super hip dominant in your squat, and it'll work itself out. A huge staple in our training now is heel elevated front squats. And that is something that I saw, I mean, you do every day. And I mean, it's the last couple of weeks I've been shooting James. Every time I see that, I'm like, yo, check this out, more of this, more of this. I did see in that Jump Science Coach Me Up, which we will talk for the people who don't understand. Coach Tim does a Coach Me Up YouTube series about where he goes and gets coached by other coaches, and it's super cool, and it's gnarly, and it's just a couple of athletes, couple of bros getting after it and training. But I did see you were doing some heel elevated front squats, heel elevated back squats. Is that, have you noticed that with those exercises that you can just introduce the heel elevation and you get some better performance out of the patella and out of the quad? Or does it take a lot of other stuff before you start seeing some results?
So the answer is, it depends on the severity and of the pain for the person. Like, can they perform this exercise on a subjective pain scale, 1 out of 10? If it's higher than a 4, if it's higher than a 5, like, maybe we don't start there, but let's say and most people can start there, in fairness, right? Unfortunately, I wish it was that easy where you could just elevate the heels and everyone is just going to drop like an elevator straight down. The quads are going to be the primary mover throughout the entirety of the exercise. But
that's exactly what he says. Yeah.
The thing about athletes is we figure shit out. Okay.
Yeah.
Athletes figure out how to complete the task. And if you load up a significant amount of weight, and I don't care if it's a front squat, back squat, even if their heels are elevated, I'm a coach. I know, I can tell myself, I know the cues internally. I know when I have the slightest shift where that weight's going back to my heels and my hips rise early and I just kind of quasi squat, good morning, that bad boy up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But an athlete, just elevating the heels, like, I need to lift more. I have to get this weight from A to B. And on some level, if you have a good eye about it, you'll see that shift still occurs. And it doesn't matter if the heels are elevated. Now, are they likely getting a better stimulus to the quads? Yes, right? I mean, it puts you in a really good position to not screw it up. That does not mean that it's not going to get screwed up. Mm-hmm. And so in order to ensure that you are truly using the knee extensors as the primary mover through that exercise, like, you have to be maniacal. And I encourage people to record their squats and be really honest with yourself. Like, am I cheating this a little bit? Because if the answer is yes, then you're just keeping that same pattern and you will get better, but you will not be able to get to, I don't say not, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get to a place where you are relentlessly training the quads and going full depth and getting a real quad stimulus with 315 pounds on a front squat, if you're still hinging into those hips. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like, I love to see how athletes move naturally through that. When you give them the heels elevated and you have them front squat, and I have two athletes that I'm working with. One's a senior baseball player, one's a freshman baseball player, both phenomenal baseball players. They're great kids and they work really hard. One kid was dealt a hand that this guy's, I don't have to say a thing. And he's there and he's up and down like an elevator. And another athlete, it just kind of clicked for me as you're talking about it. Like his quads aren't as developed, and he has a very difficult time because he's never been in those positions. And his mind tells him, I need to put more weight on the bar. And my eyes are telling me, like, let's stay with the bar for a while until we understand what it feels like to stand up and down. How do you communicate that to some of the pro athletes that you work with who are used to just racking up 315 as their second set and rolling with it, even though they're squatting with a hip dominant movement, but that's not the intention for that exercise for you? How do you have that conversation with a high level athlete to get them to buy into a new movement pattern that they're trying to open up to?
So that's a great question. So there's a differentiation, right? So if I have someone who has knee pain, right? Like I need to have that conversation and I need to explain it in detail, and I need to explain it as to why it could potentially help this jumper's knee problem, right? Now, if I've got a guy who has never had knee issues and he can squat a house, and he does it the way he does it, unless it's egregious, man, I'm going to let the man squat. You know what I'm saying? Like more often than not. Now, that being said, like I'm the coach, I get to dictate wherever that invisible line gets crossed. And I can oftentimes ask questions like, hey man, like, what do you feel working the most? And this is honestly, like, I got started with bodybuilding. Like my start in Gen Pop has served me so well getting up to, because these are simple questions that you ask a Gym Pop client all the time. It's like, are you feeling this muscle being trained? No, that's a problem, And I think that's such a simple thing that gets skipped over in strength and conditioning, because like you see football player drop down, you see football player stand up. That's a completed rep, baby. Like, is it? Because I need to get some feedback around what is actually being trained here. Now, that's not to say the quads aren't getting trained, but like if I see that an athlete is incredibly hip dominant, and so a potential area of opportunity is to bring up the quads, now I have an opportunity to start explaining that, and I can have a candid conversation, because these athletes know. I can say, dude, your quads are underdeveloped, period. Mm-hmm. That's why you're doing this when you squat. And they know, like, have them squat, have them do it in front of you. Just show me how to squat. And they'll shift. And if they shift those hips back and then the hips rise, like, I'm like, okay, man, like here's a potential area of opportunity for you. Here's how it might look. Let's rip a 45 off each side. Let's take the weight down. I want you to do 10 to 12 reps with this weight and tell me how it feels. Getting back into the body and asking them how it feels, because after they get done with that 12th rep, if they're keeping strict form, their quads are going to get smoked. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's immediate buy-in most of the time. And it's not a parlor trick. It's just, hey, dude, like you've been doing this for a long time. Let's see if we can get some benefits by switching it up and training this for a little bit. So, all of that to say, the worst response of all time is it depends, but it really does, right? Like, who is my audience? What am I trying to achieve? Is it that important for this person? And if they're getting a good quad stimulus, like maybe I don't really bring it up. I let the man squat. If I feel like it's something that needs to be addressed, and I'll tell you this, and because you did ask what cue I like to use. Sitting down into the squat, I think the weight should be on the heels, or at least evenly distributed through the foot, right? But here's where the problem seems to occur. It's that transition from the eccentric portion of the movement going back into the concentric portion of the movement, right? Because that's where the weight shifts back onto the heels again and the hips fly up, right? Now, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to use a cue, keep the weight in your midfoot. for a football guy. I mean, if you're working with an Olympic lifting guy, they're like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. But if you're working with a field sport athlete, or God forbid, a teenager of any sport, you know, telling them to keep the weight in their midfoot, good luck, right? But a cue that I have found that works is your knees go forward for you to go up. Your knees go forward for you to go up. Because the crux of the problem is the knees opening up too early, right? So if I tell you just a subtle cue, hey, drive your knees up forward for your hips to go up, it works like magic every time. And even sometimes in the bottom of the squat, if you just put, right when they get to the bottom, if you just put your hand on their knee and say, your knee can't leave my hand, the same thing happens, right? So what that principle is, and this is something else I learned from David Gray, it's delayed knee extension. It's delayed knee extension, right? I want you to hold that knee in place and allow for the hips to come up and over the top instead of you loading into the heels where the knee opens up and then I do the good morning thing.
Yeah, that was a light bulb for me when I reached out to you, James, earlier. Off air had asked how we met, and it's just I reached out about the knee stuff. I reached out about the heel elevated goblet squat, and I appreciate you so much for getting back to me. And that was one thing that stuck, is delaying knee extension. And I screenshotted it, I sent it to him, and we were training that next day. I said, "This is it, man. This is what Tim was talking about." Like, that was really big. That was really big for me. And you do recognize how much more of the movement is into the quads too. We have a 400-pound reverse lunger who is a fullback at Air Force. And the first time we heel elevated squatted him, but before his first set, he said, "Why are we doing this?" After his first set, he said, "This is the first time I've ever felt my quads when I've squatted." And I said, "So you answered your own question. This is exactly why we do this, because you can feel your leg." Again, this guy could squat a house if we cared about his squat, right? The guy lunged 405, so we have no problem. I'm sure he can, whatever we put on there, he'll squat it. Were you going to share about?
Well, and with it too, is like, it's not just the squat that this happens in. And I was just talking about to some parents. I did a webinar for on our baseball program about a dirty lunge versus a clean lunge. The same thing happens. And if we are not doing that in a squat, we're probably not going to be doing it in a lunge. And most of those reps are going to end up being hip dominant lunge patterns, which is not the intent of the exercise. But I'm definitely going to be utilizing that, and CT, I'm mad at you for not telling me that. Because that would have helped me out a couple months ago.
Yeah, keep it as myself.
Come on, man.
To your point about the dirty lunge is, again, athletes figure it out. Like, they're going to complete the task. And for me, myself, everything was hip dominant. It served me well. And I use the same strategy in the weight room. And so I've got this hip dominant squat. I've got this hip dominant lunge. I'm feeling glute. I'm feeling hamstrings. Everyone knows that if you have strong glutes and hamstrings, you're a powerful athlete. Duh, who doesn't want that? Like, strong back, strong man, posterior chain. And so that was so deeply ingrained. I'm like, oh, I'm doing these right. But I have non-existent VMOs, and I'm like, why do I need when I, try and 360 dunk a basketball? It's like, well, my quads aren't there to pick up the slack from my patella tendon.
James, so that's when your knees hurt.
That,
trying to 360 dunk a basketball. What was that, Tim? What'd you just say?
On the 8-foot hoop.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the VMO, it's okay. It's short season. It's short season. Right. We're just getting out of it here in Cleveland. But if you're not preparing all winter for short season, then what are we even doing here? I'm over being hip dominant. Let's be knee and quad dominant.
We're trying to make quad pumps cool again.
Right.
Yes.
Man. Make the thighs out great again. That's what we need.
Yes.
It's a knee dominant squat and lunge patterns. We've got plenty of stuff that we can do to load up the posterior chain. Let's get those two things right.
Right. Yeah. And that's so fun. I know I just see some of the posts you have about jorts. I just got in an argument about jorts with somebody else. Like, come on, man, cut the jorts out. And I'm like, bro, lunge a little bit, get some quads and start wearing some jorts. So again, without giving basically all the, the entire program away, we still want people interested in it. We still want people looking into it. We still want people buying it. What are some of your other kind of staples in the program that you've seen have a ton of success with yourself, a ton of success with your athletes? And I ask this because daily working with our football guys, people will come up, hey man, I can't lunge today. I got knee issues. Hey, I can't squat today. I got knee issues. So I always send them to do a few things. What are a few of those staples that you'll send people, if you're just having a quick conversation?
So I'll give you something that's in the knee program that, if I was in that scenario, the one that you just demonstrated, now I'm lucky here because I have physical therapists on staff. So, if the interventions I give as it pertains to a jumper's knee thing doesn't work, like, hey, go see the PTs. So that being said, two things that you can do prior to training that I've found that are just incredibly helpful, because part of the phenomena with jumper's knee pain is that you have jumper's knee pain. Now your brain is coming up with different strategies for you to not load that, which of course is like the problem, right? The fact that we're not able to load this thing regularly and consistently, it's weak. Now we can't load it anymore. So there has to be something that's going to put us in a position to be able to be pain-free enough for us to be able to train in a way where we can start to, I don't know if resensitize is the word, but start to train in a way that is free enough of pain where I'm starting to recognize using my quad as a reliable strategy, one that isn't going to cause tremendous pain, and continue to drill home whatever strategy or compensatory movement strategy that I've been using. So a good way to do that is isometrics, right? So Jake Tura has talked a lot about this. My favorite is the leg extension isometric single leg. And that's anecdotal. I just find that it's a little more effective.
Yeah, I love that one.
And hold that 5 sets of 45 seconds. And what you can do is just go one leg, 45 seconds, boom, switch to the other leg, 45 seconds, boom, switch to the other leg. After doing those isometrics, because there is a pain relieving effect that comes from tendon issues from isometrics if you're actually loading it. Then you can move on to the biomechanics side of things. So what I noticed with working with David is that even when I didn't do quad or patellar tendon specific isometrics, if I were to do a foam roller bridge or a foam roller bridge where I actually use the foam roller and I roll it in and out, something that's lighting up that calf and hamstring, I would have a similar effect. Where it was
that's a gnarly one too. We're going in and out of it.
My knee pain went from like a 7 to like a 2, I haven't done anything, conceptually directly to the quad or patellar tendon. And it just goes to show that so much about pain is perception, right? Like whatever's happening there. And I believe the theoretical understanding of that is I've got a calf and a knee that's stabilizing the knee. So I'm not perceiving pain as I would otherwise. My brain is perceiving a stable knee, right? So I don't know the research on that, right? But what I do know is that when I do that, the pain gets better. I'm able to train and perform in a way that allows me to do things I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. The same thing goes for that leg extension iso. You do the two together, okay? And I'm probably going to be placed in a situation to at least strength train that quad and quad tendon, where I'm not experiencing things on a pain scale, anything above a 4 or 5. And that's an important thing to note as well. Sometimes you got to train through pain, dude. Just make sure that what you're doing when you're training through the pain is actually going to help improve the pain moving forward, right? So if I'm doing a hip dominant squat and I'm training with pain, that's not great. But if I'm training and my pain scale's on a 3 or 4, and this is obviously subjective, and I'm training in a progressive manner where that quad and patellar tendon are getting a stimulus, then I'm going to be good. So that would be a big thing that I think anyone can take away right now. If you're not familiar with David's co-contraction stuff, you can just buy the knee pain program.
Bingo.
And I would recommend this for anyone, his lower body basics programs. I mean, man, like, I don't know if either of you guys have had an opportunity to go through either of them, but they're phenomenal. I highly recommend that to anyone. But isometric specific to the patellar tendon and to the quad, and you can do a Spanish squat or a single leg extension, immediately followed by some sort of isometric hold and contraction where the calf and hamstring are showing up to the party. And when you think about it on its base level, like, oh, I've created a co-contraction at the knee on the front side of my leg and the back side of the leg. It's kind of like, when you say it like that, it's kind of like, oh, duh, you know? But it's so dressed up, and the concepts can get so complicated and convoluted in terms of like what's occurring and why. I think a lot of people can miss the boat on like, does it help or not? Is the answer yes or no? Like, give me something that's actionable and useful and practical, and I'll run with it. And that for me has been those things.
Yeah, I will link a clip because you've done an awesome job in the past of explaining those co-contractions. James and I have been doing it for a couple of months now with athletes of ours. And so we explain it as well, but I definitely want to link that in this podcast because it's so important to hear how specifically you break it down, because it's not as easy to set up as it might seem, or if somebody's just looking at a picture. You've done a really excellent job of laying that out. And also the leg extension exercise I've messed with a ton, and Jake was the first one to bring that up on our podcast, and we had messed around with that. I messed around with that a ton, and really had some success on that. How do those things kind of work into is it a daily thing? Is it a weekly thing? You're training with your group of pro guys, because you're working with a high level athletes, and you can even kind of talk about some of those guys in here. But I would love to hear how you approach training your pros and how you're able to use some of this experience with knee pain. And even if guys don't have knee pain, just being able to kind of hopefully stop that process. What's that look like for you?
So most of my guys right now, there is no knee pain going on.
Awesome.
Which is great.
Yeah.
But like, you know, a lot of the way that I set that up is if I'm doing heavy bilateral knee dominant work on one day, then a lot of the accessory movement that I'll do, not all of it, but some, is going to be co-contraction based for the hamstring and calf, right? So if I'm sending a strong bilateral front squat stimulus through the body, like I also want to make sure that these guys are getting something just different into the system. And we could get into the variability thing. I don't, you know, that's just such a rabbit hole, but like, I think you give athletes options, and like, they're going to take the things they need. And a lot of times it works out. So I do like to, I have an exercise. Again, this is from David. The glute bridge with the calf pump. And it's where your upper back is against a bench on one side. Nothing but your forefoot is against the bench on the other side. And you have to keep your hips elevated while you dynamically do a calf raise. And it's glutes, it's calf, it's hamstring. And it's one of those things where it's like, you wouldn't think that you're getting a strength stimulus from this thing. If you just looked at it, I know that traditionally as a coach, I would look at, and if I walked into like, say, an LA Fitness and I saw someone doing that and I didn't know what it was, I'd be like, what is this guy doing? You know, like, is this a gym fail scenario, you know? Yeah. But man, like, it is and like, you know, I've got these big, strong freak of nature NFL guys in here, and they can't hold these positions for 15 and 20 seconds or their calves are cramping up. And something that I've noticed is a lot of people who do end up having knee pain, or particularly people who have had chronic jumpers knee pain, you get them on a foam roller bridge and that calf or that hamstring cramps up immediately, like in less than 5 seconds. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's, you know, correlation isn't causation, right? but it is a good indicator to say it's like, okay, like we can't even hold our body weight up with these muscles working together. That's not great. That's not good. So like one day I may have a really strong strength stimulus in that regards, and then I may be more biomechanics focused on the backside of the body. And then maybe we flip flop, and maybe I'm going to a stronger bilateral hinge movement. But then the accessory work for that day is going to be incredibly knee dominant reverse lunges, like through a deficit, right? I just want to make sure, and here's what it comes down to, guys, like all the big words aside, if I'm training the hamstrings, I want to make sure I'm training the hamstrings. If I'm trying to train the quads, am I actually training the quads? And it sounds so rudimentary, but God, it gets butchered all of the time. And I find that just by being maniacal and relentless about what am I trying to do, is it getting done? Yes or no? And if I'm asking myself that every set and every rep, then a lot of things take care of themselves.
That goes back to something I heard at LA Fitness that I stuck with me. And it was from one of the coaches that had been there for a while. He was pretty successful. And I was working with a client and they were like, what does this work? And he just kind of popped his head over. He said, I don't know, do 10 sets of 10 and wake up tomorrow. Tell me what hurts. And I was like, boom. And if what hurts is what you were supposed to be training, that's what it works. And if it's not, we are either doing the movement wrong, or we need a new movement, or we need a new thought process behind that movement. But I think a lot of times, you know, even in the coaching world, doing 10 sets of 10 is not something we're used to doing. So like we ourselves as coaches don't always get into those movements the way they're intended to feel the result of it. And I think that's maybe where some of that disconnect starts from, because you cannot learn that from a textbook.
No. And you know what else? You know, bodybuilding, just that word, if anything in performance related just gets poo-pooed on, you know, and it's like, but there are some simple elements that you can, hey, right there, look at Arnold in the back. He's got the man on the wall. There are such simple things that people who have been doing that for a short amount of time just understand. It's like, if I am doing a lat pull down and I am only feeling it in my biceps, guess what's not being trained? My lats. And I'm sure that now, you know, people are going to be nitpicky. Yeah, the lats are moving the humerus. Okay, I get it. All right. So yeah, they're technically getting trained, but I don't want the pump. I don't want the stimulus to be all of my biceps. I want my lats, man, you know? And like that's that very simple way to frame things. And especially if it's accessory movements, right? Which are typically in the 6 to 12 rep range, just generally speaking, right? Like if I'm doing a deficit reverse lunge, you know, is it, like you said, this sort of trashy, sort of dirty lunge, or when my athlete stands up and I see that he has a visible quad pump and he says, oh my God, my quads. I'm like, oh, okay, perfect. Like we're doing the right thing
here. Yeah. That says it all, right? So you also train with your pros.
Yeah, I do.
Which is something that just makes so much sense, right? But you see all these guys' Instagram pictures, you see all their videos, and it, you know, it's a guy sitting back there with his arms crossed, you know, coaching these top athletes. What do you get out of jumping in, training, running sprints, doing med ball throws, lifting weight with you know, some of the top athletes you work with?
You know, I was asked a question earlier about buy-in, and you want to get some buy-in, get in there, you know, get in there. Because listen, here's the thing. Like there are days, like I was running sprints with Kenny Vaccaro the other day, and objectively speaking, he embarrassed me. But he's Kenny Vaccaro. He was a overall draft pick. You know? Yeah. Like, yeah. Okay. But like what they do see is that I'm an animal and I'm relentless and I'm competitive and I want to win. I want to win the rep against them. Now, I can get away with it now because it's in season, right? most of our guys, we have about 30, 40 NFL athletes who are going to be here in the off season. I'm probably not going to, just from a management standpoint and experience standpoint for them, not going to be able to hop in nearly as often. But man, you know, I don't know about you guys. I never did well taking direction from someone who hadn't walked the walk. I need to know that you've done it, man. Otherwise, don't talk to me, you know? And so when I look at someone and I'm in there and I'm grinding with them and I'm taking 315 down on a front squat down to the bottom of the hole and coming back out, and I'm telling them like, hey man, you're shifting into your hips. I need your knees to go forward for you to go up. They say, all right. You know?
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. 10-4, you know? So I do it because I love it. You know, ultimately the competition, just being with the boys, being loud, picking heavy stuff up, putting it down, sprinting hard, competing. Those are the things that I love. I love that stuff. And for them to be able to do that with me, it's a special experience.
Yeah, man. Those videos are awesome. And Kenny's all over your Instagram. So shout out to him. People have to check that out. I want to know a little more about Collective, about the gym.
Yeah.
It's sick stuff. Black turf, right? Black and white turf.
Yeah.
Black and white, a lot of black and white videos also. Yeah. I mean, but the place is sick. Austin, Texas, right? Like you said, 40 pros in the off season. What's a day for Tim Riley look like training at Collective?
Well, right now I've got a men's sort of mastermind group that Kenny's put together with just people here in the community, influential people here in the community. It's mostly men at this point, from 8 to 9, and then the true NFL group rolls in, and guys are in and out. They're flying around. So you know the group size varies, but that's when I get my session in with the guys. That's where the real competition starts. You know, we're racing each other. We're throwing stuff for distance. We're leaping and bounding for distance. Who can outbound the next person on the next rep? Who can move the bar faster? And you know, just a rabbit hole here. Man, you don't get a lot about competition in a textbook about what it does in your training. It's environment and competition, which can be one and the same. You find a way to infuse that into your training program and watch the difference it makes. It's been incredible. And then from there, you know, the rest of my day, after I get done with the pros, it's mostly Gen Pop. So it's so cool because and then like say tonight, I have one group fitness class that I teach. It's just a strictly strength class. So all on the same day, I'll have, you know, like tech CEOs followed by NFL pros, followed by a housewife or 2 or 3, and then finished with a group fitness class. So I'm getting this like just huge expanse and array of different human movement capabilities, abilities. And I'm grateful for that, man, because, you know, I can do too much of the same thing. And even if I love it, I'll get sick and tired of it. So it keeps me on my toes. And it gives me such an appreciation moving from demographic to demographic around the things that they need, the similarities oftentimes between the two, and of course the differences. So my days are very busy right now, which is a blessing. It's a blessing to be busy, baby, especially in this business, in the private sector. So, you know, I'll go from 8 a.m. till 3 with no break. I'll have a buddy go run, get me a big old smoothie, and I'll choke that down with a client. And then it's food, and then whatever evening client I have. So, your boy's working.
That's awesome, man. And I love the ability to go from different client to different client, different needs, but movement is beautiful, whether it's an NFL athlete doing a perfectly executed heels elevated squat with 300 pounds, or an adult who used to have knee pain 3 months ago, who's now executing a beautifully, you know, executed heels elevated squat with 35 pounds. And you know, I think, and that's probably the coolest part of the job, at least for me, because we do get to see a different population every hour that we're in the gym. Do you ever jump in with the adults and then they're just like, holy shit, what's going on here?
You know what? No, I don't. And the only reason why is because I've usually already done my training for the day, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and the service changes. So,
yeah,
with the morning guys, like they want me in there. Like if I'm not jumping in, they're like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you warming up? You know what I mean? Like they enjoy me being a part of the process. Whereas, it's a complete shift in terms of intensities and the way I communicate and relate to these pro athletes to it is to the housewife who's got 3 kids. She didn't sleep last night because her littlest was up all night, woke her up 3 times. It's just a different service I'm providing. Yes, I'm training them both, but the buck stops there. How I relate to these people and the conversations that I have and the level of intensity or lack thereof that I bring to that session is going to be largely dependent on what version of them that I'm getting walking through the door that day. And so, in that way, you try and meet athletes where they're at. In that way, you try and meet your Gen Pops clients where they're at. And a lot of time, it's just being there, being available, being all ears, being present, not looking at my phone or recording excessive videos of them hitting PRs. It's just being with them in the room. A lot of times, like, they don't want to see me deadlift 405 for reps or whatever. Like, they're not, like, they don't give a shit, Yeah. They don't want to see that, they don't care. They're there for their version of Tim.
I think what's so cool is it shows so much about the individual as well. It's a conversation that I have a tough time having with interns and young coaches, where I try to say just that. Yes, the pro is on his way out, and I'll dap him up and I'll tell him I'll see him tomorrow. But then when mom comes in, or when the 13-year-old basketball player comes in, or when the 21-year-old college student comes in, you've got to be able to be flexible and switch, and then understand what, like you said, where they are at, what their goal is. And it's so hard because, again, it's not something you get from a book of just being personable and being that person who, no matter what age or demographic or place that you're training, you can still bring the best version of yourself into that training session. Do you have any advice for younger coaches? I mean, I always think about our intern group and trying to share information with our interns. Do you have any advice for younger coaches on people who are struggling to do just that? Connect with the youth kid, then connect with the college kid, then connect with the pro.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, you're providing a service. I'm going to say it again. You provide a service, right? Like, it's not about you. For that time period, it's about how can I best serve the person in front of me? Are you talking about your relationship problems to your client? That's the roles of it. It's wrong. You know what I mean? Like, what is it? How are you receiving them when they walk in the door? Are you asking first how their day's going, how they are feeling? It needs to become the sole focus of the session is to how can I best serve this person? And if you're honestly asking yourself that question kind of several times throughout the session, like, am I showing up for Catherine right now the way she needs me to show up? And a lot of times, if you don't know, ask. Jesus, how forget a client, another human being responds to you when you say, hey, I don't know that I'm really showing up for you the way that you need me to. Like, what can I do? Is there something I can be doing better for you? Ask that. I dare you out there listening. If there's someone you're working with and you're like, God, I just can't connect with this person, try that and see what happens. Because look, man, I like working with people. I like training. All that's great. You know what I don't like? Working with a stranger over and over again, and someone that I feel like I'm not actually helping, right? Like, that's miserable, bro. Everyone's had a client who they're like, God damn it, here comes so-and-so again. Like, I'm stuck here 3 times a week with this guy. Well, like, break the barrier. Like, ask yourself honestly, am I connecting with this person on the highest level possible? Am I serving them? And watch your day-to-day quality of life improve. It's about them initially, but the thing that I've seen is when I shift things off of what I need to do and where I need to be, and when I have that paradigm shift of like, how can I effectively be helpful to this person across the board, I enjoy my day more because I'm better at my job, you know? So I hope that that resonates with someone and that it's helpful, because it's been helpful to me.
That's so good. When I catch myself, and I did this exactly that a couple of weeks ago, I had an athlete getting ready to come in, and I thought, oh shoot. I said, here we go. And as soon as I said that, wait, this is a me thing. This is, you know what I mean? Like, because I always try to pride myself on the hour that an athlete works with me is I try to make it the best hour of their day.
Yeah.
And I do understand that if I feel that way about it, I'm projecting something like that. Mm-hmm. And I need to make the change, because that's definitely a me thing. I want to transition a little bit to the Coach Me Up. We're talking about a little bit about your training, how you train with the guys. What have you learned from going out with other coaches, working with other coaches? I'm running this YouTube series called Coach Me Up. What have you learned about yourself and your training, and what you need to implement more of by working with other coaches?
Man, that just everyone has something to offer, really, you know. And I think success does leave clues. And someone is always better at you than some aspect of your game. You know, if you look at your coaching toolbox and you compare it to, let's say, a basketball player and their game and their skill set, like LeBron over time, like had to add elements and pieces to his game as he grew and matured, because he had to, if he wanted to continue to be the best, right? It's the same thing for me as a coach, right? Like, you know, I wanted to understand how to improve an athlete's vertical jumping ability and explosiveness in general. I go to Daniel Bach, Jump Science, and I say, dude, like, obviously what you do works, right? Like, show me, take me through a workout or two. Like, what testing do you use? And then now going through that process and learning it hands-on and being the student, being the client, being the athlete, like, you know, it's one thing, because and this is my beef with podcasts a lot of time. It's like, God, like, you know, everything is so surface level. Like, give me something I can go do, man. You know, I want to go, I'm going to go try this out in the gym now, you know? And that was something that I loved about Coach Me Up, where I can go and I can learn straight from that person. And another thing that's sort of birthed from that is that, God, there are so many ways to skin a cat. There are so many different ways to accomplish an outcome. You know, so many people are successful in this field and get great results. And, you know, what we like to do, or what I see as an industry we like to do, is we like to pick each other apart and really tear each other to shreds about what's right, you know, and what's true. And, you know, sometimes it's just not that simple, man. And if you really want to learn and you really want to understand someone, instead of just, you know, planting your flag and saying, this is how we do things over here, why don't you go, you know, knock on their door and say, hey man, like, show me what you got. Like, why do you think this works? And, you know, we were having a conversation off air. But, you know, if I could spend more time doing that, if I had the resources, that's how most of my time would be spent, would be going and learning in person and learning from coaches who are better than me or get better results than me, whether the quality is speed or power or just general athletic development or mindset, whatever, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, I'll just say real quick, you get a greater buy-in from athletes when you're the one doing it. Like, you've trained this way, you've done this, you've squatted this, you've lunged this. So I want you to see that I'm consistently doing this. I'm trying to make myself a better athlete just to help you become a better athlete. And I love that you're doing that.
I think my favorite part about what you're doing with Coach Me Up is, like, you're running into things that you know might smack you and be really challenging. By opening up and saying like, hey, I want you to coach me, and you're a strength coach asking for coaching, you know, there's got to be a little bit of like, oh, this might be really freaking hard. I'm going to run that way. And I just love that approach. And it's so cool to see and so cool to hear that story, and then match that up with all of your experiences that you've had. And those things usually go together, where you run into what's dangerous and what's scary and what might really crush you for a workout. And I think that's just so cool.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. You know, I found it's like, you know, I can stay, if I'm not growing, I'm dying. And that principle applies not just professionally, but that's been my experience just in general. If I'm not moving forward and I'm not willing to get uncomfortable, then I'm going to stay where I'm at, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but you know, I want to know what I'm capable of, and I'm never, ever going to know what I'm capable of. I'm never going to be able to serve my clients, my athletes, myself to the level that I want to, unless I'm constantly challenging what I think. And if that means that Jake Tura just pummels me underneath a bench press for 10 sets of 4, then so be it. You know? Like, and you know what? Like these coaches that I've done these episodes with, like, we're friends now. Like me and Jake leave each other stupid voicemails on a regular basis. I mean, like regularly. And it's a highlight of my day when I get something from him and it's just outrageous. And I have to try and mute my phone real quick because it's not appropriate for the room. Right. Wait, like me and Daniel Block, like we play pickup basketball together, you know, like he's become a very close friend to me. So like, you know, it's been a reoccurring theme in my life when I'm willing to just reach my hand out and say like, hey man, like I want to know more about what you do. I respect who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. Show me the way. And this is something that this moniker is saying, it's a blessing to allow other people to help you. And, you know, from a societal standpoint, and as men in general, I think it's really difficult to get over the hump, to be able to go to another person, man or woman, and say, hey, I need help here. I want to be better. I think you're better. Can you show me? And the surprise, the thing that usually comes up when people think about that is that, oh, this person's they're going to reject me. They're not going to be willing to help. Or if they do, I'm going to look like an idiot doing it. And like, maybe all three of those things happen. So what? Like, do you want to get better or not?
Right.
Do you want to be better or not? Like, I'm willing to have someone say, nah, dog, I'm good. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll go find the second best coach.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Oh man, that's so good. We learn so much about ourselves through failure and challenges. I know you're super busy. We've taken up an hour of your time. Do you have a couple minutes to do some finishing up questions? I don't want to.
Sure.
Okay. So just a couple kind of rapid fire, and we got a couple questions from Instagram as well. And then just something, you know, the usual question we wrap up with. So what have you learned in training since you've become a father? You know, I know you've got a young daughter who's beautiful. What have you learned about training, and even more specifically training youth kids or training athletes since you've become a father that you didn't know before you were?
Yeah. Kids are humans. Kids, we are resilient and we figure things out. You know, my daughter, I've seen her just do things at 3 and 4 years old, which just they don't make sense. And she's not like some elite athlete kid. She's just a kid, you know, but I'm like, how the fuck, like if my 40-year-old clients could do what you're doing, I would not have a job, you know? And so much of human movement is innate and inherent, and the brain figures things out. And it just makes me think, like, how much of this stuff are we training out? How much of it, how limited is our thinking actually when it comes to training? And of course, it's a slippery slope and a fine line, you know, like between like what things are actionable, practical, that move the needle, and like what is like a circus trick, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I think exposures to different, especially young, just exposing kids, exposure to different movements, different sports, different, as much variety as possible, as early on as possible. That's just the ultimate medicine, right? And like, I think what happens is as we get older, like we just kind of, our movement becomes more and more limited. I mean, even for me, like, you know, I'm sprinting, running, jumping, throwing. Most of the time I feel good. Sometimes I don't, you know, sometimes my low back shows up, you know, like whatever, right? Like just the general aches and pains. But like when you really think about it, and like I look at the movement that my daughter has on a regular basis, just from the playground to her not being willing to sit still in the living room, like she is exploring every avenue of movement humanly possible. So it's been eye-opening for sure.
That's awesome. Do you have any couple from Instagram? Do you have any non-negotiables throughout the day? Are there a few things that you have to do to feel like you've had a successful day?
Any non-negotiables? You know, I usually, what I would have said prior to my daughter is that if I hadn't given my best effort, no matter what, for that day, then the day was a failure. And what I've come to understand is that sometimes it's just not your day. Really, like you do the best you can. You do the best you can. Show up for people the best way you can. Show up for yourself the best way you can. And sometimes that it looks like shit. You know, sometimes it's not pretty to whatever your internal standard is, right? But I've got a mentor and a close friend of mine. He says, sometimes you just got to root for midnight. Life is going to show up, get through it, and do better the next day.
Yeah, sun will come up, root for midnight. Nutrition tips. It's funny because I'm like, man, I'm putting this picture, you know, of this big jack dude on my Instagram. Of course, this picture the question comes up. First question that comes up: does guy have any nutrition tips? You know, nutrition tips, Tim,
what's the supplement stack?
Yeah, what's the stack? What's the sleep schedule look like?
Yo, that dude's
yeah,
on
man, any
creatine
tips you got? Any kind of low-hanging fruit
like
stuff?
An animal pack and Jack's.
My pee is neon green.
Yeah, man, you know, I've actually, so I did a functional medicine mentorship with a guy, Dr. Ben House, who's brilliant. And the reason why is because I had tremendous gut health issues for a really long time. And I've gone down that functional medicine rabbit hole because at one point in time, I thought that was going to be the answer, right? That's why my knee hurts. You know, honestly, there are a lot of practical things that seem to really work. Like nothing is to be demonized, you know, find the things that work well for you. Generally eating protein, carbs, healthy fats, and veggies at each meal is advisable. Try not to snack constantly throughout the course of the day. Drink water and don't eat like an asshole, you know? And like, that's the basics. It's so much more difficult than the way I just said it. You know, I put something up on my story the other day, trying to tell someone who's morbidly obese to just stop eating is the same thing as telling an alcoholic to stop drinking, is the same thing to tell someone who's suffering from depression to just cheer up. So, you know, usually I don't even like to typically give advice because you don't know where people are at. But if we're talking generally, yeah, you know, eat every 3 to 5 hours, make sure you have plenty of lean protein and healthy carbs at each meal, lift, and then lift more than you did the last time, the next time you lift. Like those are on the most fundamental level, probably the most actionable places to start.
Simple, not easy. All right.
Right.
Something Coach James and I talk about all the time. It's very simple. Just be smart about it, but it's not easy. And it's hard sometimes not to eat like an asshole. Right. So I totally get it. Last one, man, we always wrap up with what do you think strength and conditioning in its current state is missing?
Yeah. I find this weird sort of bipolar thing that I see in our industry where it's like people are willing to like go learn from some people, but like not others, you know, or like if so-and-so says something about this one really hyper specific thing, then it's like a, you know, it's a wildfire. And I just, I think the thing that's missing is probably, and I'm biased because, this is what I like to do, but I think if more people spent more time genuinely trying to understand, seeking first to understand what and why someone's doing something, and being okay with the fact, like, you don't have to know the answer. Like, when I started doing that work with David Gray, like, I didn't understand it, but what it did? Worked. Like, when did understanding something become more important than the outcome? That blows my mind. Like, at what point are you so pretentious and so locked up about having to have a peer-reviewed study on, like, no, does it work, dude? Yeah. All right. Sign me up. Sign me up. I'm about that action, baby. If this thing works and I see that it works and it works consistently, that's more important to me than the why and the how and the listen, like, all that stuff's really good. And I'm not dismissing it. Obviously it's important. But yeah, I'm more concerned with outcomes.
Dude, thanks so much for being on, man. We appreciate all the knowledge you shared, opening up, being so kind, so much information in just this hour conversation. And that's why we started doing this. And I say it all the time. We did it selfishly because we wanted to have conversations with people who, just like you said, and coach me up, do this better than we do. And we so much appreciate you being open and spending your time with us. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, sure. At Tim Riley Training. Also, you can find me on YouTube at Tim Riley Training. I currently have the knee pain program for anyone who is who wants to bust out the jorts and have glorious quads, or B, improve jumpers' knee pain. So Instagram and YouTube are my homes. And guys, I just want to say thank you to having me on. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, man. We'll let you get back to what you're doing. I know we have the same thing on the schedule, heading back to the gym to get some work. But everybody listening, please continue to practice gratitude. Tell the people you love that you love them, and live life stimulated. We'll see y'all on the next.